In examining why fiction can be and often is more real than reality, we have to look at what reality is. In order for this organism to interact with its ecology, it needs to maintain certain boundaries, it needs certain sources of energy, and certain sources of protection. And the senses that we have do not pick up reality. They pick up and amplify small heuristic symbols of reality. Little bits here and there that when this happens, this often happens, and when this often happens, this often happens. And this has something to do with food or protection or water or some other source of self-perpetuation. So we have this heuristic model where we look for certain cues. We look for them in mates, we look for them in the general and natural environment. And as we create a composite image of all those very, very selective cues, just within the domain that we're able to perceive, because reality is, of course, much bigger than the sound frequencies we can pick up, than the light frequencies we can pick up, than the taste, touch, etc. frequencies. And then there are other dimensions of reality we don't pick up at all, but which can be far more important for human survival. Now, in the domain of what's useful, we need to have a sense of truth. This is where facts are useful, but we also need a sense of psychological truth, because the dirty little secret in a cult that has an active boycott on emotional and psychological literacy, meaning if you're born in many Western cultures, you will not only go cradle to grave, kindergarten, middle school, high school, college, work, retirement, medical visits, etc., without a single hour of formal scientific, emotional, or psychological literacy, where the facts of the psyche, the facts about which events and external circumstances produce what feelings, and what feelings produce what actions, and what actions produce what events. The most pivotal loop that is possible to study for human well-being and survival, the loop between feelings and the actions they motivate, and the realities those create, and the feelings those create, for which the pivotal stimuli is the feelings. Because if you have zero feelings, you don't get out of bed. You don't avoid danger. It's fear that has you avoid danger. It's desire or fear or guilt that gets you out of bed. So without human feeling, everything stops. And yet we have this mysterious boycott on emotional illiteracy. And if we take it a step further, we not only have a boycott on emotional literacy, on the science of feelings, we have a shame-based active suppression of truth, meaning we don't share what feelings are produced by what circumstances. We share what feelings are good and what feelings are bad based on cult dogma, not based on any science. So we say it's bad to be envious, it's good to be generous, but we don't say that it's bad to have scarcity and look at the cult that produces a level of scarcity that might lead to envy, for example. Instead, we say it's bad to have the feeling that is produced by the scarcity. And so we have things completely mixed up. And coming upon that ignorance, meaning built upon a mountain of shame and ignorance, we then take further steps to suppress, to bury, to deny the feelings that are bad, because we don't want to then be attacked by ignorant people who say that we're bad for having the feelings that are suggested to be bad, that are produced by the events that people aren't correlating. You know, it'd be like telling a thermometer that 89 degrees was a bad temperature and then sticking the thermometer into 89 degrees water and then hitting the thermometer when it gives out the temperature reading. And so we do this to children all the time in an exercise in stupidity, in an exercise in futility. We bury the truth underground. And then we create this veneer, the politically correct veneer, where we say we feel and we say we do what the cult says is the thing to say and do and feel. But the underlying mathematics does not add up. In other words, we drive ourselves and each other insane with lies about cause and effect, with lies about morality, with lies about what we're actually thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, to be more politically correct. And then we punish the truth. And so we have a politically correct veneer on top of all of this. Now, you cannot survive if you believe the politically correct veneer. So where do you go for truth so that you have a more accurate map of reality? If nobody will speak the truth because they're bowing to the dogmatic ignorance of the cult and subscribing or perpetuating the politically correct veneer, well, you go to fiction. Now, fiction is far more true than nonfiction because it's absent the political pressure. Meaning a fictional character is not going to be shamed or humiliated for telling the truth, and if they are, a fictional character can deal with it. Because we do not hold authors responsible for the behavior of their fictional characters. If an author creates a fictional character that sexually molests a small child, then if that author was held responsible for that character's behavior, the author would delete that character. But because we do not hold authors of fiction responsible for their characters' thoughts and behaviors. We allow greater truth to be visible in fiction rather than nonfiction. Now, how do you know something is true? How do you know something is relevant to you? One, because you chose it. And I would say that this is the single most important thing, that considering that you have a biology that is very selective in what it elevates, what it highlights, meaning we are tuning the vast majority of reality out constantly, just as part of existing. There's just so much that we're not aware of, and we're not aware that we're not aware of. And so what is it that we're honing in on? And I would suggest that we're honing in on the patterns of energy that have the greatest influence on our lives. So, for example, if I'm reading romance novels, addictively or otherwise, one could say that in my psyche, at this time, romance novels with what? Adrenaline, betrayal, sensuality. What's the thing? Being perfect, being acceptable, whatever those themes are, have taken up residence in me as being relevant to my well-being, to my thriving. Now, I may be in an outer environment where to act and engage in those ways is not politically correct. And so one of the problems with the politically correct veneer is that because it is imposed with judgment, it's imposed with judgment and law and with various consequences. It's not actually changing the inner conversation. Instead, it's superimposing out of fear what should be happening, but it's not generating the changes in the outer environment so that that's happening naturally. I mean, racism is a disease, and it heals naturally when you have prosperity, when you have dignity, when you have people who are emotionally and psychologically aware. If you change the culture to be emotionally and psychologically literate, someone who may unconsciously go along with slavery because their parents did becomes disgusted with the downgrade in their own humanity in order to go along with the dogma of slavery. Because the dogma of slavery is built on the dogma of inequality. And the dogma of inequality is built on a dogma of ignorance. And when you actually get to know another human being intimately and vulnerably, you realize the dogma of those lies. And you can no longer subscribe to the dogma, to the inhumanity of slavery, because you have seen another human being through the veil of your dogma. But it would take an emotionally and psychologically literate group of human beings to lift out of racism naturally. And we're not lifting out of racism naturally. We're lifting out of talking about racism. And we're doing so with shame and dogma. It doesn't work as well. And so it's more real to deal with the truth that awakens your imagination, your feelings, your senses. And with imagination, with reading a fictional book, etc., all the senses come alive through imagination. As you vividly imagine things, your senses become alive. And when your senses become more alive in your fiction than in your reality, it is a symptom of the fact that the fiction is closer to your soul, closer to your spirit, closer to where your body and consciousness is residing. Because that's what a fictional author has to touch in order to sell a book. I mean, books are pieces of paper. They're not that interesting. To get you to pay attention to a piece of paper rather than everything outside in the whole world waiting to be discovered, to get you to pay more attention to that paper, what's on that paper has to be absolutely spot on in terms of its engaging your body, your heart, and your mind, where you are. Because if it engages a body, heart, and mind that has nothing to do with you, you can't relate to those feelings, you can't relate to those sensations, you're not interested. Your interest comes from its relatability. Its relatability comes to meeting you where you're at. In other words, bits of paper have to be far more real than the outer reality for someone to be excited to get home from work, etc., and read not the political correct garbage that has been pushed down on them, but rather the truth of, this awakens my body. This is what makes me feel. This author understands me. And there's no judgment. There's simply connection. A connection between an author and the heart, mind, and body of a reader through the symbol of language. This author sees me where I am. I feel alive because who I actually am is connecting with something that connects with me as I am. And so in this way, fiction can be far more real than reality. If you want to understand what's going on in the heart, mind, and body of a culture, of a cult, look at what they read. Now, the news and the like has become more fictional to hold attention, to speak to those deep narratives. But in all cases, it's a competition to connect with what's there in a media environment where attention is the prize.